It was raining that evening, soft drops tapping on Daniel Carter's luxury car as he parked near the small diner. He had no real reason to be there. His business meeting had been canceled at the last minute, and the expensive five-star restaurant he usually went to was fully booked. He could have gone anywhere else, even back to his mansion, but something about that old diner caught his attention. Maybe it was the smell of fresh bread in the air, or maybe it was just curiosity. Either way, he stepped inside, shaking off the rain from his coat. Daniel hadn't been in a place like this in years. The floor was old and squeaky. The tables had scratches, and the air smelled like fries and strong coffee. He looked out of place in his tailored suit and expensive shoes. People glanced at him, then quickly looked away. He took a seat by the window, not expecting anything more than a quick meal and silence. Then it happened. A waitress walked by, carrying plates of food to a nearby table. Daniel saw her from behind her posture. Her walk-it felt familiar. Too familiar, his heart skipped a beat, but he brushed it off, thinking, it can't be. But when she turned around, everything stopped. The tray in her hands, the chatter in the diner, even his breath, it all froze. It was her, Amara, his ex-wife. Pregnant, tired-looking, and wearing a cheap uniform with a faded name tag on her chest. She hadn't seen him yet. She was talking to a customer, smiling politely even though her eyes looked heavy. Her hand rested protectively over her belly. And Daniel couldn't move. The last time he saw her, they were shouting, throwing words like knives, and then she was gone. He never expected to see her again, especially not like this. Amara finally looked in his direction, and for a moment, he hoped she'd smile, or at least show some emotion, but she didn't. Her face was calm, cold even, like he was just another face in the crowd. She walked toward his table slowly, her shoes making soft sounds on the floor. "Welcome," she said, her voice steady. "What can I get you?" Daniel tried to speak, but nothing came out. She stood there, pen in hand, waiting. He cleared his throat. Struggling to find his words, "Amara," he finally whispered. She didn't flinch, didn't look surprised. "Yes," she said flatly. "That's my name." Daniel's eyes dropped to her stomach, which was now impossible to ignore. The small round curve told him what she didn't have to say out loud. She was pregnant and alone. "I didn't expect," he began. But she cut him off. "Would you like a coffee, sir?" she asked, keeping her tone professional. Daniel felt the sting in his chest, like a blade had just been gently pushed in. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, coffee, sure." As she walked away, he couldn't help but stare, her back, her hair tied up messily. Her small limp that she tried to hide, she was the same woman he once promised forever to. And now she was serving tables for tips while carrying a child. A waitress nearby leaned in and whispered something in her ear, probably asking if she was okay. Amara didn't respond, just picked up the coffee pot and poured him a cup like nothing happened. Daniel sat there in silence, staring at the steam rising from the cup. He remembered their life together, how they used to cook pancakes at midnight, argue about silly things, then laugh until they fell asleep. He remembered how she used to dream about opening her own art gallery. Now, she was wearing tired shoes and an apron stained with oil. And he was a millionaire, sitting in a place he never belonged. Wondering how he let it all fall apart, he had walked away from her, thinking success and peace came from distance. But now, sitting in that small diner with a coffee he didn't want, he realized something was missing. She didn't need to say a word. Her silence was louder than any scream. He wanted to stand up, say something, explain everything, but he stayed seated, watching her move through the room like a ghost in someone else's life. One of the cooks called her name, and she hurried toward the kitchen, holding her belly carefully. Daniel noticed how no one offered to help her. She was on her own, just like she had been for the last 2 years. And for the first time in a very long time, Daniel Carter felt poor, not in money, but in something much deeper, something he once had and lost. He stared at her through the steam of the coffee cup, and in that quiet moment, with the rain still falling outside, he knew this wasn't just a coincidence. It was a chance, maybe the last one he'd ever get. And he wasn't ready, not even close. But he wasn't going to leave, not this time, not when she was right there, and carrying what might just be his child. Daniel sat at the corner table, still frozen, the coffee untouched in front of him. He kept glancing toward Amara, who moved between tables like nothing had happened. She smiled at strangers, refilled drinks, and wiped the counter when no one was watching, but Daniel was watching. He couldn't stop. Every little movement reminded him of the woman he once loved deeply. And left without looking back, she had changed. Yet something about her still felt the same. There was strength in her silence and something sad in her eyes. Even when she smiled, he remembered her laughter. The way she used to throw her head back when she found something truly funny. But here, her smile was small, polite, and controlled, like someone had taught her not to show too much. A customer complained that their fries were cold, and Amara didn't argue. She simply apologized, picked up the plate, and went back to the kitchen. Daniel's chest tightened again, watching her quietly take the blame for something that wasn't her fault. She didn't fight back, didn't raise her voice, just accepted it and moved on. He finally stood up and walked to the front counter where she was pouring coffee into a thermos. "Can we talk?" he asked softly, not wanting to make a scene. Amara looked up, clearly tired. Her voice was low, calm. "I have 5 minutes before my break ends." She didn't say she wanted to talk, but she didn't refuse either. Daniel took that as a yes. They stepped outside, just beyond the diner's side door, where the rain had calmed into a soft drizzle. The alley was quiet, except for the distant sound of passing cars and the hum of the kitchen's exhaust fan. Daniel looked at her carefully. Trying to read her face, Amara leaned against the wall. Her arms crossed over her chest, not because she was cold, but because she was guarding herself. He took a deep breath. "You're pregnant," he said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. "Good observation. I didn't know," he said, his voice shaking a little. "Why didn't you tell me?" Amara looked at him for a long moment, then finally spoke. "You left, Daniel. Remember?" she said, her voice calm but sharp. "You walked out and never looked back." He opened his mouth, but she raised a hand. "And don't say you tried." "No, you didn't." Daniel swallowed the words he wanted to say, because deep down, he knew she was right. He had been so focused on his new business, his rise to the top, his fresh start. He told himself it was the right thing at the time, but now it felt like a mistake that couldn't be fixed. "I didn't want your money," she added. "I wanted you." That one sentence hit him like a punch. She wasn't bitter, just honest. There was no begging in her voice, just truth, and that made it hurt more. "I didn't know how to come back," Daniel admitted, his voice cracking. "I thought you moved on. That you hated me?" Amara laughed, not because it was funny, but because she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You thought I moved on?" she said. "You think I had time for that?" "I was too busy surviving." She placed a hand gently on her belly. "And now I'm focused on this little one." Daniel looked at her hand, resting there so naturally. He had so many questions, but none of them felt safe to ask. Instead, he whispered, "Is it mine?" Amara didn't answer at first. She just looked at him, her eyes dark and unreadable. Then she said, "If you don't know the answer to that, maybe you never really knew me." And with that, she turned and walked back into the diner, her break over, leaving Daniel alone in the alley. Soaked with regret, he stood there, staring at the closed door. He didn't chase after her. He didn't know if he even had the right to. But he knew one thing for sure. The pain in her eyes was real. And somehow, he had caused it back inside. Amara returned to her shift like nothing had happened. But her hands trembled slightly as she filled glasses with water. The girl at the counter leaned over and whispered, "You okay?" Amara nodded. "Once, just another ghost from the past," she said. The girl glanced at Daniel, still standing outside the window like a man who'd seen a life he lost. "You want me to ask him to leave?" The girl offered. "No," Amara said quietly. "Let him sit there and think." Daniel returned to his seat, but everything felt different now. The coffee was cold. The room felt warmer than it should. And his thoughts were loud. He watched her work, and at HFY she wasn't waiting for him to fix anything. She had already built a life without him. A hard life, maybe, but it was hers, and she stood in it with pride. And still, even after all the hurt, she didn't scream at him, didn't throw things. She served food and held her belly like the baby was all that mattered now, Daniel realized. Then that this wasn't a movie moment where one grand apology would fix everything. This was real life, and in real life, words meant nothing without action. He had walked away once, thinking she'd be fine without him, and maybe she was, but now that he had seen her again, he knew something for sure. He wasn't. Daniel returned to the diner the next day. Early in the afternoon, when the lunch crowd hadn't arrived yet, he parked his car across the street and just sat inside, watching through the rain-speckled glass as customers came and went. His heart beat faster the moment he saw her again. Amara, wearing the same uniform, her hair tied back, holding a tray in one hand and a notepad in the other. She looked tired, but graceful, moving with quiet strength. She hadn't seen him yet. Part of him hoped she wouldn't. Okay. But the other part needed her too. Finally, he got out of the car and stepped inside. The bell over the door giving a soft chime, Amara noticed him right away. Her eyes narrowing just a little, but she didn't stop what she was doing. She served 2 more tables before finally approaching him, her expression unreadable, back again. She said calmly, "We must make really good coffee." Daniel gave a small smile, unsure what to say. "I just wanted to talk," he said softly, "if you'll let me." Amara looked at the clock, then gave a tired sigh. 5 minutes. She said again and motioned for him to follow her outside. This time, they stood near the back of the building, where it was quieter and the air smelled like damp pavement and fried food. Daniel looked at her closely, at the curve of her belly, the small scar near her eye he had forgotten about. He wanted to say so many things, but his throat felt tight. "I wanted to say sorry," he finally said. "Really sorry. For walking out, for not checking on you, for everything." Amara nodded slowly, not because she accepted it, but because she'd heard that word before from others. Not him? "Why now?" she asked. "Why show up after all this time? What do you want from me?" Daniel shook his head. "Nothing," he said quickly. "I swear, I don't want anything. I didn't know you were living like this. Working while pregnant? Alone?" She raised her eyebrows. "You think I'm broken because I work? Because I wear an apron and clean tables?" He flinched, realizing how it sounded. "No, I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly. I didn't expect this." Amara crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes sharper now. "That's the problem, Daniel," she said. "You didn't expect anything because you didn't care to look." Daniel felt his chest tighten again. "I thought about you every day," he said. "I thought maybe you'd moved on, found someone better, had a new life." Amara scoffed. "Moved on? Found someone better? You left me with nothing but memories and a broken heart, and now you think I found comfort in someone else." She stepped closer, her voice still quiet but full of pain. "You didn't even call, Daniel." "Not once." Daniel looked down, ashamed. "I was scared," he admitted. "I didn't think I was good for you." I felt like I was dragging you down. Then you should have said that, she replied. Instead of disappearing like I never mattered, there was silence between them, heavy and sad. Then Daniel asked the question that had been sitting in his heart since yesterday. Is it mine? Amara stared at him, her jaw tight. Yes, she said finally, it's yours. Daniel's legs felt weak, and he leaned against the wall for support. He had imagined the answer, but hearing it made it real. How far along? He whispered. 7 months, she replied. Almost 8. He did the math in his head, remembering a night they thought would be their last fight, but ended up in bed instead. It all added up now, perfectly, painfully. Why didn't you tell me? He asked again, voice shaking. Amara's eyes softened just a little. I was going to, she admitted. I even had the message typed. But I stopped myself. Why? Because I knew you wouldn't come, she said simply. Or, worse, you'd send money and think that was enough. Daniel felt that one deep in his gut. She knew him better than he wanted to believe. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check, an apartment key, and a folded letter. Amara looked at it, but didn't take it. What's that? She asked. My apology, he said. A new place near the clinic, money to take time off work, and a letter explaining everything. Amara shook her head slowly. No, she said, pushing the envelope back into his hand. You don't? Get to fix this with paper? Daniel blinked. I just want to help. Then help, she said. Show up. Be present. Don't try to buy your way back in. A gust of wind passed through the alley. Blowing a bit of her hair loose from her ponytail, she tucked it behind her ear and gave him one last look. I'm not angry because I'm poor. Daniel, she said, I'm angry because I loved you. And you walked away like it was easy? Then she turned around and went back inside, leaving Daniel holding the envelope. Standing in the cold, with nothing but guilt and a second chance slipping through his fingers for the rest of that day. Daniel didn't leave. He sat in his car, watched her work until closing time, and never stopped thinking about her words. Paper doesn't make a father, but maybe being there, really there, could be the start of something he should have done long ago, not just for her, but for the child growing inside her. His child, their child. The next morning, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept replaying Amara's words in his head. Don't try to buy your way back in, she had said. And that hit harder than anything else. He had always believed money could fix things, that it could patch the holes left behind. But this wasn't a business deal. And Amara wasn't for sale. This was deeper, real, and painful. And now, it was too late to pretend that everything would be fine if he just wrote a check. He sat on the edge of his expensive bed in his quiet penthouse. Everything looked perfect around him, clean, rich, polished, but for the first time in years, he realized how empty it all was. No sound, no warmth, no family, just him, his guilt, and a child he had never known about growing inside the woman he once promised forever to. He picked up his phone and opened old pictures. There she was, Maro, laughing in the sunlight, paint on her cheeks from working on her art, he remembered. The day he took that photo, they were broke, but happy, living in a tiny apartment with loud neighbors and broken sinks. Still, she was smiling because they were together. Now she worked long hours at a diner, pregnant and alone, and he had everything except her. Later that day, he called one of his private investigators. He needed answers, not to hurt her, but to understand. Find out if she's been seeing anyone since the divorce. He said, I need to know who's around her. He hated asking, but doubt was eating at him. A part of him still questioned if the child was really his, not because he didn't believe her, but because it felt impossible that she'd go through this alone by choice. The report came within hours. No boyfriends, no dating profiles, no man visiting her apartment. The neighbors even confirmed Amara had lived alone since she moved. To that town nearly 2 years ago, worked long hours, kept to herself, never caused problems. There were doctor appointments, bills she paid late, groceries she often skipped to save money, and yet, no sign of anyone else in her life. Not even a friend who came over regularly. She really had done it all on her own. Daniel felt a heaviness. In his chest, it was pride and heartbreak mixed together. He admired her strength and hated himself for not being part of it. She had carried his child, fought alone, suffered in silence, and never once asked for help. He drove to her apartment that evening, parked outside, and waited in the car. When she stepped out of the bus carrying a small grocery bag, he got out. Amara stopped when she saw him, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" she asked, not angry, just tired. Daniel took a deep breath. "I just wanted to talk." Without walls between us, she gave a short sigh, but didn't walk away. He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "I had someone look into your life," he admitted. "I'm sorry if that feels wrong. I just needed to understand what you've been through." Amara didn't look shocked, just stared at him calmly. "And what did you find?" she asked. "That you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for," he said softly. "That you've been alone and still didn't give up." Amara looked down, then up again, her eyes blinking fast, like she was trying to hold something in. "Do you think I wanted to do this alone?" she said, her voice finally cracking. "I cried the first night, the second, and every week after, hoping maybe you'd come back." Daniel felt her pain like a knife. "I should've," he said, stepping closer. "I was a coward, Amara." She shook her head, her eyes glossy now. "You weren't a coward. You were selfish," she said. "You cared more about your pride and your plans than the person you said you loved." Daniel didn't argue, because she was right. He had been so focused on success, on building a name, on growing his company. He thought love could wait, but life didn't wait, and neither did she. Suddenly, her knees bent slightly, and she held her belly. Daniel stepped forward instantly. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said, breathing slowly. "The baby's just active, kicks like a fighter." He smiled softly, takes after the mother. Amara rolled her eyes but didn't push him away when he gently placed his hand near her stomach. She hesitated, then let him feel it. A small, strong kick. It was the first real connection he had ever felt with his child. His breath caught in his throat. "I want to be part of this," he said quietly, "not to take over. Just to show up." Amara didn't speak for a long moment. Finally, she said, "Then, don't just say it. Prove it." She handed him the grocery bag, walked past him slowly, then turned back and said, "I like orange juice with no pulp. If you're staying, learn the little things." Then she disappeared into her building. Daniel stood there holding the bag, stunned. It wasn't a yes, and it wasn't forgiveness, but it was something better. It was a door, slightly open, and this time he wasn't going to walk away. Not now, not ever again. Daniel kept coming back, not with gifts, not with apologies written on paper, but with time. He would wait outside the diner quietly, walk with Amara to her apartment when her shift ended, and carry her grocery bags without asking. He didn't force conversation, didn't push her to talk about the past. He was just there, present, finally, in the life he once walked away from. At first, Amara didn't say much. Sometimes she gave him short replies. Sometimes she didn't speak at all, but she never told him to leave. She let him walk beside her in silence. And for Daniel, even that was something precious. It meant he was allowed to stay close, at least for now, one evening. It started raining hard while Amara was finishing her shift. Daniel showed up with an umbrella and stood at the door waiting. The other waitresses giggled and whispered to Amara. Calling him the loyal millionaire, Amara rolled her eyes. But when she stepped outside and saw him soaked just to keep the umbrella over her, she couldn't help but smile a little as they walked. Daniel offered, "I found a prenatal class nearby. I thought maybe we could go together." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you know what a prenatal class is?" He smiled. "Since last night. I watched 5 videos and took notes." She laughed softly, not because of the joke, but because it felt strange to laugh near him again. It wasn't the same as before, but something in her heart was warming. Up against, lowly, carefully, but not everyone was happy with this change. Amara's neighbor, Mrs. Douglas, an older woman who had looked after her during hard months, gave Daniel a sharp glare every time he visited. One afternoon, when Amara had gone inside, Mrs. Douglas walked up to him. "I know your type," she said. "You leave when it's hard and come back when it's easy." Daniel didn't get angry. He nodded and replied, "You're right to worry. But I'm not here because it's easy. I'm here because I finally realized what matters." She stared at him for a long moment, then said, "She cried every night for months. Boy, don't you dare make her cry again." Daniel gave her a quiet promise. "I won't." Days passed, then weeks, and slowly Amara began letting her guard down. She let him help organize baby clothes she had saved. She allowed him to drive her 2 appointments, and one evening, while they were sitting quietly on her worn-out couch, she surprised him. "Do you want to hear the heartbeat?" she asked, holding up a small device she had borrowed from the clinic. Daniel's heart almost stopped. "Yes, please." She placed the cold gel on her stomach and turned the machine on. A few moments passed, then came the sound, soft, fast, like tiny drum beats echoing through the room. Daniel covered his mouth, overwhelmed. "That's our baby," he whispered, eyes shining with emotion. Amara nodded, watching him closely. It was the first time she saw just how much he meant those words, not as a man full of guilt, but as a father who wanted to do better. Later that week, something happened that shook Daniel to his core. He arrived at the diner and was waiting outside like usual. But Amara didn't come out. 10 minutes passed, then 20. He went inside and saw one of the waitresses crying. "She fainted," the girl said, panicked. "She's in the back. She said she was dizzy, and then she just collapsed." Daniel rushed past the counter without asking for permission. He found Amara lying on the floor, her face pale, one hand on her stomach. A paramedic had just arrived and was checking her pulse. Her pressure's low. He said, "She needs rest, and probably fluids." Hospital's the next stop. Daniel rode with her in the ambulance, holding her hand the whole way. At the hospital, he stayed by her bed as she slowly woke up. The doctor said it was exhaustion, poor nutrition, and stress. Nothing dangerous yet, but a warning sign. "You've been doing too much," Daniel told her gently, brushing her hair back. "You have to let someone help you now, please." "Let me help." Amara looked at him with tired eyes. "I didn't have a choice," she whispered. "I couldn't afford to rest." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes. "You do now," he said. "You don't have to fight this battle alone anymore." He stepped outside and made a decision. He picked up the phone and called his lawyer. "I want to transfer half my company shares into a private trust," he said, "for Amara and the baby. No conditions, no control, just protection." The next day, when Amara was discharged, Daniel met her with fresh clothes, a car, and a simple offer. "I'm not asking you to move in with me," he said. "I'm asking to take you somewhere. Safe, somewhere better than this." She looked at the envelope he held out, thinking it was another check, but when she opened it, she found keys and a lease with her name on it, paid for a year in full. No mention of his name anywhere, no pressure, just freedom. "This is for you," he said. "Whether you let me in or not." Amara was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll come see it," she said, "but I'm not promising anything else." Daniel smiled because that was more than enough. She didn't have to promise. She just had to let him keep showing up, and he would. No matter what it took, no matter how long it took, he was finally ready to stay. Through everything, not as a visitor, but as a father, and maybe, one day, as the man she once loved, again. The apartment Daniel had rented for Amara was small but beautiful. It had soft lighting, warm wooden floors, a quiet bedroom, and a tiny balcony with 2 chairs. When she stepped inside for the first time, Amara stood still for a long time. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just slowly walked from room to room. Her fingers brushed the new kitchen counter, the clean curtains, the baby crib already set up near the bed. Everything had been prepared, but nothing felt forced. There was no note saying, "Come back to me." No flowers begging for forgiveness, just comfort, safety, and space. It was quiet like a deep breath after months of struggling to survive. Daniel didn't follow her inside. He stood at the door, holding a box of diapers and baby wipes, waiting for her to say something. Finally, she looked back at him and said, "You can come in, but don't start thinking this means anything more than help." He nodded, stepping in slowly, placing the box down near the closet. "I understand," he said softly. One step at a time, over the next few days, Amara rested more. She slept without worrying about broken heaters or leaking ceilings. She ate full meals without counting every coin. And every morning, Daniel arrived with groceries, sat with her while she ate, and listened. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, just sat in silence as the baby kicked softly inside her. And sometimes she'd tell him little things. How she had learned to cook rice 10 different ways. How she sang lullabies to her stomach at night when the kicks kept her awake. And how she had once dreamed of painting murals in hospitals to make sick kids smile. Daniel listened to every word like it was a story he'd never heard before, even though he once lived part of it with her. One night, they were watching TV on the couch when a commercial came on showing a family playing in the backyard. The parents laughed, and their child ran around holding a balloon. Amara's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. "That used to be my dream," she said quietly. "To sit in a backyard with my child, just watching them laugh." Without thinking about bills or pain or who didn't show up, Daniel turned to her. "It still can be," he said. "You're not alone anymore." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened for the first time. She didn't look like she was holding everything inside. He could see it. She was slowly letting go of the heavy armor she had worn for too long. And he didn't rush her. He just stayed, quietly proving every day that he wasn't leaving again. A few days later, they went to a checkup together. Daniel sat beside her, holding her hand as the doctor moved the ultrasound wand across her stomach. The screen showed a tiny foot, a curled hand, a strong heartbeat. Daniel couldn't stop smiling. "Everything looks perfect," the doctor said. Amara looked over at Daniel, and for the first time, there was a soft pride in her voice. "He's been coming to every appointment now," she told the nurse. The nurse smiled at Daniel. "Looks like you're doing something right this time." Daniel nodded. Not proud, just grateful for the second chance he never thought he'd get. On the way home, Amara asked if they could stop by her old apartment. Daniel didn't ask why, he just drove. When they arrived, she went inside and came back with a box. Inside were baby clothes she had collected from thrift stores, a few hand-me-downs, and a tiny book with the title, Mommy's Promises. She handed the book to Daniel. "I started writing in this after you left," she said. "Each page is a promise I made to the baby." Daniel opened the first page and read, "I promise to protect you. Even when I'm scared," the second page said. "I promise to love you, even if I'm alone." Daniel's hands trembled as he turned the pages, page after page of love, strength, and pain. And on one page, about halfway through, it said, "I promise that if your father ever comes back, I'll make sure he earns his place." He looked at her, eyes full of emotion. "I want to earn it, Amara," he said. "Not just for you, but for him or her." Amara nodded, quietly taking the book and putting it back in the box. She didn't say much, but she didn't need to. Her silence wasn't rejection anymore, it was reflection. She was thinking, considering, feeling. That night, as he helped her settle into bed, she looked at him and said, "I'm scared." Daniel sat beside her. "Of what?" "Of letting you in," she whispered, "and losing everything again." He took her hand, gently holding it between both of his. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But I'd rather earn your trust slowly than spend the rest of my life." Wishing I had, she didn't answer right away, but her hand didn't pull away. And that alone meant everything. The next morning, she called out to him from the kitchen, "Want to help me make pancakes?" He smiled as he stepped in. "I still remember how you like them burnt edges and too much syrup." She chuckled softly. "Let's see if you remember anything else." They stood side by side, flipping pancakes, sharing quiet glances and small smiles. It wasn't love again yet, but it was something better than before. It was the beginning of rebuilding, not from money, not from guilt, but from showing up day by day, choice by choice. And this time, Daniel knew he wasn't going anywhere. It was a quiet Saturday morning, and the sun had just started to shine through the windows of the small apartment. Daniel was sitting at the dining table, cutting fruits, while Amara rested on the couch with a pillow behind her back. Her belly had grown bigger, and she moved slower now, holding her lower back often and taking deeper breaths when she stood up. The baby was almost here, just a few more weeks. Daniel had stayed by her side every day, never missing a moment, but he still hadn't heard the words he wanted most. She still hadn't told him that she trusted him. She hadn't told him that he had been forgiven. That morning, while Daniel was preparing breakfast, Amara called out softly, "I didn't sleep well." She said, rubbing her belly. "The baby kept kicking all night." Daniel walked over with a gentle smile. "He's probably getting ready to meet the world." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe just practicing how to fight you already." They both laughed quietly. But Amara's laughter turned into a sharp breath. She placed a hand on her belly, her eyes narrowing slightly. Daniel immediately knelt beside her. "Was that a contraction?" Amara nodded slowly. "Maybe. I'm not sure. It felt different." The next few hours were a mix of quiet waiting and soft tension. Amara tried to rest, but the pain kept coming and going. Daniel kept checking the time between each wave. He had downloaded an app that tracked contractions and tried to act calm, but inside, he was scared. He had never been so afraid, not even during big business meetings or when he risked everything to build his company. This was different. This was her and their child, and he couldn't lose either of them. By late afternoon, the pain had become stronger, more regular. Amara finally gave in. "It's time," she said through gritted teeth. Daniel didn't waste a second. He grabbed the hospital bag they had packed together last week, wrapped her in a coat, and helped her down the stairs carefully. The drive to the hospital was only 15 minutes, but every second felt like forever. Amara held his hand tightly the whole way, squeezing hard every time another contraction hit. He whispered to her, "You're doing great. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." At the hospital, nurses rushed to help her, checking her vitals and guiding her into a room. Daniel stayed right by her side, refusing to sit in the waiting area. When the nurse told him he could stay for the delivery, he nodded without fear. He had missed so many moments in the past, but not this one, not when it mattered most. Hours passed slowly, full of pain, sweat, and tension. Amara squeezed his hand until her nails dug into his skin. At one point, she looked at him with tired eyes and said, "I can't do this. It hurts too much." Daniel leaned close and wiped her forehead with a cold cloth. "Yes, you can," he said softly. "You're the strongest person I know." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and for the first time, she didn't hide them. And when the time came to push, Daniel held her hand tightly and whispered, "Just a little more. I'm here. I've got you." Then suddenly, There it was, the soft, sharp cry of a newborn. The room filled with a sound that changed everything. The doctor smiled, holding up the baby. "It's a boy," she said, wrapping him in a soft blanket. The nurse placed the baby on Amara's chest. She was crying, exhausted, shaking but smiling, and Daniel. Daniel was speechless. He looked at his son, tiny red. Perfect hand, felt something deep inside his heart break open. It was love, raw and powerful. And it was real. He leaned down and kissed Amara's forehead. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on him. Or on me." She looked at him with tired eyes and said nothing at first. But after a moment, she whispered, "You didn't run this time." Daniel shook his head. "I never will again." That night, Amara rested in the hospital bed with the baby asleep in her arms. Daniel sat in the chair next to them, watching over them like a silent guard. The nurse walked in and whispered, "You can go home and rest. We'll take good care of them." Daniel smiled gently. "I am home," he said, without looking away from Amara and the baby. Around midnight, Amara woke up slightly and saw him still sitting there. She looked at him in the dim light and said, "He needs a name." Daniel nodded. "I've been thinking about that." She raised an eyebrow, and he smiled. "How about Elias? It means the Lord is my strength, and it suits him because he's strong." "Like you." Amara looked down at the baby and softly whispered, "Elias." The name rolled off her tongue like a melody. She looked back at Daniel, her eyes soft and a little watery. "That's perfect," she said. "Thank you." And then, for the first time, she reached for his hand without hesitation. Not because she needed help, but because she wanted him there, beside her, with their son, together, in that quiet hospital room. With the beeping machines and the soft hum of life around them, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't just feel like a father. He felt like a man who finally belonged, not to a business or a title, but to a family. And this time, he wasn't going to let go. 3 days after Elias was born, Amara was released from the hospital. Daniel carefully helped her into the car, gently placing the baby seat in the back. Elias was sleeping peacefully, his tiny hands curled into fists. Amara sat quietly, her body still tired, but her heart a little more at peace. Daniel didn't say much during the drive. He just kept looking at the rearview mirror, checking on his son every few seconds. Every little breath the baby took felt like a miracle to him. He had never known such a small life could hold such a big part of his heart. When they reached the apartment, Daniel opened the door and stepped aside to let Amara in first. The moment she stepped inside with Elias in her arms, she paused. There were small changes in the apartment, nothing big, but thoughtful. A soft rocking chair stood near the window, a basket of baby supplies beside it, and a note on the fridge with meal reminders for her. Amara turned to him slowly. "You did all this?" Daniel nodded quietly. "I just want to make things easier for you." For him, she didn't say anything, but he saw her eyes glisten a little. She walked to the rocking chair and sat down with Elias, still sleeping against her chest. Daniel stood nearby, unsure what to do. He wanted to help, but didn't want to overstep. "Do you need anything?" he asked softly. Amara looked up, her voice low. "Yes." "Stay." That one word made Daniel's heart swell. He pulled the chair closer and sat near her, just watching them, his family. That evening, as Elias slept in his crib, Amara lay on the couch, resting with her eyes half closed. Daniel sat at the edge of the couch, scrolling through his phone, reading articles on newborn care. Suddenly, Amara spoke, her voice tired but clear. "I used to imagine this moment," she said, "coming home with a baby. And someone waiting for me." Daniel looked at her, quietly listening. "I imagined you'd be there," she added, "but I never thought you really would." He nodded, his voice soft. "I wasn't there before, But I'm here now, and I'm staying. Amara didn't reply right away, but she slowly reached out and took his hand. It wasn't romantic, it was real. It was trust, finally given back after being lost for so long. Daniel held her hand tightly, knowing exactly what it meant. She was letting him in, not just into the apartment, but into her life again, into Elias's life. The next few days were filled with small moments that meant everything. Daniel woke up early to warm bottles and hold Elias when he cried at night. He learned how to change diapers, messy, frustrating, but he never complained. Amara would watch him struggle with baby clothes and laugh quietly. "You're putting the shirt on backwards," she'd say, and Daniel would grin. "At least it's not upside down." They were building something, slowly and beautifully. Not perfect, but honest. One evening, while rocking Elias in his arms, Daniel looked at Amara and said, "Can I ask something?" "Sure," she replied, sitting across from him, sipping warm tea. "Do you think?" He paused, nervous. "Do you think there's a chance for us? I don't mean right now. I know it'll take time, but someday." Amara looked down at her cup, then back at him. "I don't know," she said honestly. But I don't hate the idea anymore." Daniel smiled, and for the first time, felt a little hope. He didn't need a promise. He just needed the door to stay open, and it was. Weeks passed, and Daniel continued to be there every day. Every night, when Elias cried, he got up without hesitation. When Amara was too tired to cook, he made dinner even if it was just scrambled eggs and toast. He became her teammate, her support, and one morning, as she watched him dance around the living room with Elias in his arms, singing off-key and spinning gently, she realized something. She wasn't just healing, she was happy one afternoon. As they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Amara turned to Daniel and asked, "Why did you really come back?" Daniel looked at her, surprised. She continued, "You could have stayed gone. You had your life. Why return?" Daniel thought for a moment, then said, "Because I was successful, but empty. Rich, but alone. And then I saw you. Carrying my child, working, fighting, surviving." He paused, his eyes soft. "And I realized I had left the best part of my life behind. You, Amara. And now, Elias. I came back. Because you two are my home." Amara didn't say anything right away, but she reached out and rested her head on his shoulder. They sat like that as the sky turned gold and the baby slept peacefully. Inside, no more anger, no more fear, just quiet understanding. A new beginning. That night, as Daniel tucked Elias into bed and kissed his tiny forehead, he whispered, "Your mama's stronger than anyone I know. And I'll spend my life proving I'm worthy of her and of you." From the hallway, Amara heard him. She didn't interrupt, just wiped a silent tear and smiled. She had waited for someone to choose her, fully, not just in words, but in actions. And now, she had that. Not just for her, but for her son. It hadn't been easy, and it still wouldn't be. But for the first time, she wasn't walking alone. Daniel wasn't perfect, but he had stayed. Through the storm, through the pain, through the doubt, and now, finally, she believed him when he said, "I'm not leaving again," because now he was no longer just a man from her past. He was the father of her child, and maybe, just maybe, her future too.